It was supposed to be routine, a carefully scheduled royal appearance, a statement about future stewardship, but what the world heard instead sent shockwaves through palaces, parliaments, and private estates alike. In a single calm but unflinching announcement, Prince William rewrote the unspoken rules of inheritance within the monarchy, and in doing so, he ignited a storm no one saw coming. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The words themselves were measured, deliberate, almost restrained. There was no tremor in his voice, no dramatic flourish, no hesitation. Yet when he declared that his inheritance would be transferred solely to his children, the atmosphere shifted in an instant. Solely. A single word, sharp and unmistakable, slicing through centuries of quiet assumption. It was not framed as rebellion, it was presented as responsibility. But everyone listening understood the magnitude of what had just occurred. This was not a minor adjustment in estate planning. This was a public repositioning of power. Behind palace walls, aides who prided themselves on anticipating every development were left stunned. There had been no discreet briefing, no careful leak to prepare the press, no whisper of transition strategy circulating among senior courtiers. The announcement had been held close, guarded with precision. Even those accustomed to royal surprises admitted privately that this one felt different. It was bold in its clarity. It offered no room for reinterpretation, no shared allocations, no extended branches, only a direct line father to children sealed in intention. Traditionally, royal inheritance has operated within a delicate ecosystem. Assets were stewarded, redistributed, balanced across family lines to preserve cohesion as much as wealth. Influence flowed through subtle channels, reinforced by financial security and quiet understandings. By narrowing that flow to a singular path, William did more than designate beneficiaries. He disrupted the architecture of expectation. In doing so, he forced an uncomfortable question into the open. Who, exactly, stands to lose when exclusivity becomes policy? Speculation erupted almost immediately. Commentators dissected the scale of estates involved, from ancestral holdings to private trusts accumulated over generations. Financial analysts spoke of consolidation. Royal watchers spoke of strategy. And within the extended family, the implications landed with a weight that could not be disguised by polite statements of unity. Influence within the monarchy is rarely about titles alone. It is reinforced by access, by security, by the quiet confidence that resources will be there when needed. By redirecting everything to his own children, William signaled a future in which the inner circle tightens, not expands. Yet, the public response was not uniformly critical. Younger generations, long skeptical of opaque royal privilege, saw something else. They saw a father prioritizing stability. They saw a future king drawing a protective boundary around the next generation. To them, this was not exclusion. It was clarity. It was modernization wrapped in paternal instinct. Traditionalists, however, sensed erosion. They worried that narrowing inheritance could fracture long-standing bonds, creating silent divides where shared interest once fostered cohesion. And through it all, William remained composed. No defensive clarification, no softening amendment, just a steady reiteration that his decision was about safeguarding legacy. Because beneath the financial language, something deeper was at play. This was not simply about distributing wealth. It was about control of narrative, of stability, of the unpredictable currents that have so often destabilized royal history. It was about ensuring that his children would never find themselves negotiating for security within their own institution. The shock may have been immediate, but the roots of this decision run far deeper than a single announcement. And if we are to understand why this single sentence detonated centuries of tradition, we must look beyond the microphone and into the private calculations that led him there. Behind the crown lies a man shaped by loss, a son who once walked behind a coffin, a boy who learned, too early, that royal privilege offers no immunity from heartbreak. When Prince William chose his children over protocol, he wasn't just making a financial decision, he was rewriting his own story. Long before he stood firm behind that microphone, Long before the word solely reverberated through the monarchy, there was a quieter reckoning unfolding within him. The shadow of his mother has never been a distant memory. It has been a living force, shaping his instincts, sharpening his fears, and redefining his understanding of security. He grew up witnessing how influence can shift overnight, how affection can be politicized, and how vulnerability inside the royal structure can be costly. The loss of Diana did more than break a nation's heart. It carved into him a permanent awareness that legacy without protection is fragile. That lesson did not fade with time. It matured. For William, inheritance is not an abstract privilege, it is a shield. And shields, in his mind, must be strong enough to withstand internal storms as much as external scrutiny. His children are not merely heirs in waiting, they are his living promise that history will not repeat itself. George carries the weight of destiny. Charlotte possesses a quiet resilience that mirrors strength he deeply admires. Louis, still untouched by expectation, represents innocence he is determined to preserve. To the public, they are symbols of continuity. To him, they are the reason continuity must be fortified. There has always been tension between the institution and the individual. The monarchy demands sacrifice. It requires alignment, restraint, compromise. But fatherhood reshaped his priorities. Insiders speak of private conversations in which he expressed one unwavering goal: to end uncertainty. Not scandal, not rivalry. Uncertainty, he has seen how ambiguity breeds instability. How loosely defined arrangements create openings for conflict. By consolidating inheritance, he is attempting to close those openings before they widen. This is where devotion begins to challenge tradition. Duty calls him to uphold systems designed long before his birth, yet devotion pulls him towards something more immediate, more visceral, the instinct to guard, the instinct to secure. In quiet moments, he is said to have reflected on how often royal children inherit not just wealth, but tension. Expectations layered with competition. Visibility layered with vulnerability. He has no intention of passing that forward unexamined. Breaking patterns is never comfortable. It invites criticism. It invites suspicion. But it also creates stability when done with conviction. By narrowing the flow of inheritance to his direct line, William is symbolically drawing a boundary. He is saying that the next era will not be governed by diffuse loyalties or ambiguous claims. It will be structured, deliberate, and insulated. That decision carries emotional weight. It risks alienation. It risks quiet resentment among those who once assumed proximity meant participation. And this is where the deeper fracture begins to form. Because while his children may gain certainty, others may feel distance. Extended branches of the family, accustomed to shared privilege, may interpret consolidation as exclusion. The psychological shift is subtle, but profound. Influence, once broadly distributed, begins to tighten around a smaller circle. That tightening may protect, but it also pressures. William understands this. He is not naive about the ripple effects, yet he appears willing to absorb the criticism if it means insulating his children from the instability that marked parts of his own youth. In his mind, this is not favoritism. It is prevention. It is the refusal to let future heirs navigate the same emotional labyrinth he once did. But intentions, however heartfelt, do not exist in isolation. Because as protective instinct transforms into structural change, the monarchy itself must respond. And that response will not be simple. Yet this paternal instinct would collide head-on with an institution built on shared power and silent expectations. For generations, royal inheritance followed an unwritten code, a delicate balance of hierarchy, discretion, and diplomacy. It was never about favoritism. It was about preserving unity, until now. Because when William chose exclusivity over distribution, he didn't just alter paperwork, he challenged the monarchy's internal equilibrium. The monarchy has always operated on a principle that few openly discuss, but everyone understands. Stability is sustained through shared stakes. Estates, trusts, properties, and private holdings were historically arranged to reinforce cohesion within the wider family structure. Senior heirs carried the crown, yes, but extended members maintained relevance through carefully calibrated financial security. It was not generosity, it was strategy. Distribution ensured loyalty. Allocation preserved quiet harmony. The system thrived on balance. William's decision disrupted that balance with a precision that left little room for interpretation. The distinction between primary heir and sole beneficiary may appear subtle to outsiders, but within royal circles, it is seismic. A primary heir leads the succession. A sole beneficiary consolidates power. That difference is not symbolic. It determines who commands resources, who negotiates from strength, and who gradually fades from influence. By narrowing inheritance exclusively to his children, William redrew the internal map of leverage. Extended relatives, long accustomed to proportional consideration, were forced to confront an uncomfortable new reality. Expectations that once felt secure suddenly appeared conditional. Those who had quietly assumed continuity of support began recalculating their positions. There were no public protests, of course. Royal dissent rarely unfolds in headlines, but behind formal smiles and composed statements, shock hardened into unease. Some saw reform. Others felt displacement. Legal advisors moved swiftly, though quietly. Trust frameworks were reviewed, amendments drafted, protective clauses inserted with deliberate speed. The machinery of inheritance, typically gradual and discreet, accelerated under a veil of confidentiality. Those close to the restructuring process describe an atmosphere not of panic, but of urgency. Once a public declaration of this magnitude is made, reversal becomes weakness. William ensured that his resolve would be mirrored in legal permanence. Rumors of emergency consultations circulated within palace corridors. Not chaotic confrontations, but measured discussions heavy with implication. Senior figures reportedly sought clarification. Was this a temporary consolidation, a symbolic gesture, or the beginning of a broader structural shift? The absence of ambiguity in William's wording made the answer increasingly clear. This was not a negotiation tactic. It was a declaration of direction. Emotionally, the divide sharpened. To some, William's stance represented bold modernization, a refusal to perpetuate diffuse entitlement. To others, it felt like a quiet severing of long-standing bonds. Betrayal and reform began to share the same space, depending on perspective. The monarchy has survived because it adapts without appearing to fracture. The question now whispered among insiders is whether this adaptation carries the risk of visible fault lines. There is also the matter of precedent. Royal decisions are rarely isolated. They echo forward. By redefining inheritance so decisively, William may be setting a template future monarchs could follow. Consolidation over distribution, insulation over inclusion. That trajectory strengthens the immediate line of succession, but narrows the broader circle of shared interest. Not everyone will accept that narrowing without resistance. And resistance within a royal structure does not always manifest loudly. It accumulates, it lingers, it waits for moments of vulnerability. William's resolve is firm, but firmness invites scrutiny. The consolidation of wealth is also the consolidation of influence, and influence reshaped can unsettle alliances once considered stable. As the legal documents settle and the implications deepen, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. This was not merely administrative reform, it was structural confrontation disguised as prudence. And as whispers turned to confrontation, the walls of the palace began to feel narrower than ever before. Publicly, there were smiles, diplomacy, carefully worded statements about supporting the future. Privately, the atmosphere was electric. Shock gave way to disbelief. Disbelief hardened into resentment. Because when inheritance becomes exclusive, influence follows, and influence is the monarchy's most guarded currency. In the immediate aftermath of William's declaration, composure became the family's first line of defense. No raised voices reached the press. No dramatic resignations surfaced. Yet beneath that polished restraint, conversations unfolded with an intensity rarely seen. Those who had long operated within the assumption of shared continuity suddenly realized the ground beneath them had shifted. The exclusivity was not symbolic, it was absolute, and absolutes leave little space for negotiation. For some extended relatives, the revelation felt like a quiet erasure. Their proximity to the throne had always carried an implicit assurance of participation in influence, in legacy, in the long arc of royal continuity. That assurance now seemed conditional, not revoked outright, but diminished. In royal structures, diminished relevance is more threatening than public criticism. It alters leverage. It narrows access. It subtly repositions individuals within a hierarchy where perception is power. Cousins who once imagined themselves stakeholders in a broader dynasty began recalculating their futures. Private estates, patronages, advisory roles all suddenly appeared more fragile. Influence within the monarchy has never been measured solely by title. It is reinforced by financial independence, by the capacity to act without reliance. William's consolidation signaled a future where that independence would belong almost exclusively to his direct line. The emotional impact was not theatrical, it was internal, and internal reactions often carry the deepest consequences. Within the hierarchy, power began to recalibrate, not through public decrees, but through subtle shifts. Invitations became more strategic, consultations more selective. The gravitational pull of decision-making tightened around William and Catherine. This tightening was not aggressive. It was deliberate. Those once accustomed to being consulted on legacy matters found themselves observing rather than influencing. And observation in royal politics can feel like exile without announcement. Alliances, too, began to evolve. Where there had once been assumed unity, new quiet alignments emerged. Some senior figures chose open support, framing the decision as visionary. Others maintained distance, neither endorsing nor condemning, carefully preserving their own positioning. The monarchy thrives on subtlety, but subtlety can conceal tension as effectively as it conceals harmony. Amid this shifting landscape, Catherine's presence remained steady. She did not publicly defend the decision. She did not soften it. She stood beside it. Her silence carried weight. For many, her unwavering alignment signaled that this was not an impulsive move, but a shared conviction. Together, they presented a united front, a modern royal partnership, prioritizing their nuclear family above extended tradition. That unity amplified the message. This was not temporary recalibration, it was structural intent. Yet beneath the emotional currents lies something even more consequential. By narrowing inheritance, William is narrowing the circle that will ultimately define the monarchy's identity. The next era will be shaped by fewer voices, fewer distributed interests. Consolidation creates clarity, but it also concentrates authority. And concentrated authority inevitably reshapes internal dynamics. Resentment, if left unaddressed, rarely dissipates. It lingers in corridors. It waits for moments of vulnerability. William's decision may protect his children, but it simultaneously tests the elasticity of royal unity. The monarchy has survived upheavals because it absorbs tension without appearing fractured. The question now is whether this tension can remain contained. Because what is unfolding is not merely emotional fallout, it is political repositioning. It is the Lent negotiation of who will matter and who will watch from the margins. And as the recalibration deepens, one truth begins to crystallize. Inheritance is a declaration of future authorship. But inheritance isn't only about wealth, it's about who shapes the narrative of the future. Was this emotional, or was it chess? Because some insiders believe William's announcement wasn't reactive, it was preemptive. A strategic consolidation designed to secure generational control before he ascends the throne. And if that's true, then this wasn't just bold, it was revolutionary. Strip away the sentiment, and a colder logic begins to surface. Monarchies survive not through impulse, but through anticipation. Every era introduces new pressures: political scrutiny, financial transparency, shifting public expectations. By narrowing inheritance now, before the crown rests on his head, William may be fortifying the line of succession against storms that have not yet arrived. Consolidated assets mean fewer disputes. Fewer disputes mean fewer fractures. And fewer fractures mean a reign that begins with stability rather than negotiation. History has shown that ambiguity within royal estates can breed tension. Divided interests create quiet rivalries. Competing claims to influence can weaken authority before it fully forms. By establishing his children as sole beneficiaries, William eliminates potential bargaining positions within the family. The future monarch George would inherit not only title, but consolidated strength. Charlotte and Louis would stand secured, not dependent on the goodwill of extended structures. This clarity reduces room for internal maneuvering. It removes grey areas. In strategic terms, it simplifies the board. Financial independence is more than comfort, it is leverage. A future sovereign who does not rely on diffuse family arrangements holds clearer authority. Decisions become less encumbered by obligation. Influence remains centered. William may be anticipating a monarchy that must operate leaner, more decisive, less entangled in extended expectation. If so, this inheritance shift becomes an early rehearsal for the style of reign he intends to lead: streamlined, contained, direct. There is also the signal it sends externally. To the public, the image transforms. Not merely an institutional heir preserving ancient customs, but a father deliberately constructing security for his children. The narrative shifts from inherited entitlement to intentional guardianship. In a modern age skeptical of inherited privilege, framing consolidation as protection may soften critique while strengthening perception of leadership. The monarchy evolves not by abandoning tradition, but by reframing it. Yet, strategy always carries risk. Senior royals, accustomed to influence supported by shared financial continuity, may interpret consolidation as marginalization. Even if not immediately vocal, discomfort accumulates. Alienation does not require open conflict. It requires distance. And distance within a monarchy can quietly erode cohesion. William's calculated move may secure his children's futures while simultaneously narrowing the cooperative foundation that has historically supported the crown. The deeper question lingers: is consolidation strength, or is it isolation disguised as reform? Concentrating power creates clarity, but it also increases pressure. With fewer distributed interests, scrutiny intensifies around the core. Every decision becomes magnified. Every misstep carries greater consequence. By tightening the circle, William strengthens its walls, but he also ensures that any cracks will be more visible. Still, preemptive action often defines effective leadership. Waiting invites reaction. Acting invites control. If this was chess, it was a bold opening gambit designed to shape the entire match before opponents even fully grasp the configuration. William has positioned his children not just as heirs, but as an insulated nucleus around which the future monarchy will revolve. And yet, no strategic move exists in a vacuum. Each action generates countercurrents. Consolidation invites recalculation from those affected. Reform invites scrutiny from those invested in precedent. What appears visionary to some may feel exclusionary to others. The quiet revolution unfolding within inheritance law may soon reveal deeper fault lines beneath its surface, because revolutions, even quiet ones, rarely unfold without resistance. Across the nation, the reaction split cleanly in two. Some called it visionary, others whispered about exclusivity and entitlement. Social media erupted. Commentators debated, and suddenly, William's decision became more than private family business. It became a referendum on the future of monarchy itself. Within hours, timelines filled with sharp opinions and emotional declarations. For a younger generation raised in an era of transparency and accountability, the move felt refreshingly direct. They saw a father stepping outside outdated conventions, reshaping an institution often criticized for being slow to evolve. To them, consolidation was not greed, it was clarity. It suggested that the monarchy could adapt, that it could prioritize stability over tradition, intention over inheritance rituals that few truly understood. In their eyes, this was modernization wrapped in decisiveness. But for traditionalists, the word solely carried a different weight. It sounded abrupt, final, excluding. Royal legacy, in their view, was never meant to contract. It was meant to bind a web of shared heritage, connecting cousins, siblings, and extended lines in a tapestry that symbolized Contin, Uti. By narrowing inheritance, William appeared to tighten that tapestry into a smaller circle, and smaller circles, they feared, could weaken the broader symbolism of unity the monarchy depends upon. Media outlets seized on the language with relentless focus. Analysts replayed the announcement, dissecting tone and phrasing. Was there emphasis on protection, on control, on inevitability? Headlines framed it as a bold reset. Others framed it as a quiet rupture. The single word that had electrified palace corridors, now fueled primetime debates, solely became shorthand for transformation, or division, depending on who was speaking. Financial experts entered the conversation with numbers and projections. Speculations swirled about the scale of estates involved, the consolidation of trusts, the magnitude of assets redirected into one direct line. While precise figures remained confidential, the consensus was clear. This was not symbolic rearrangement. It was structural reallocation. Markets may not have trembled, but institutional watchers understood the magnitude. Wealth concentrated is influence concentrated, and influence, once concentrated, reshapes power. Beyond the United Kingdom, global headlines amplified the narrative. International observers interpreted the decision through their own cultural lenses. Some viewed it as a necessary streamlining of an ancient institution struggling to remain relevant. Others saw echoes of elitism, sharpened by exclusivity. The monarchy, long accustomed to managing domestic scrutiny, now faced a broader conversation about its future architecture. Public image became the quiet battlefield. William's supporters praised strength and foresight. Critics questioned whether insulation risked alienation. The monarchy has always balanced mystique with approachability. This decision tested that balance. It presented William not merely as heir apparent, but as architect of a redesigned dynasty. The distinction matters. An heir maintains. An architect transforms. And beneath the surface debate lies something more profound: generational transformation. Younger audiences tend to reward decisiveness and direct accountability. Older audiences often value continuity and shared legacy. William's choice positions him firmly within the former framework, even as he inherits the latter. That tension will define not only this moment, but the shape of his eventual reign. The public conversation may feel loud, even chaotic, but noise often masks deeper shifts happening in quieter spaces. Because while headlines capture emotion, permanence is forged elsewhere. And as commentators argue and audiences divide, another layer of this story is unfolding away from cameras and commentary. But the loudest reactions were not on television. They were unfolding quietly in legal chambers, documents, trusts, amendments. The mechanics of inheritance may be quiet, but their consequences echo for decades. Once signed, there is no retreat. And insiders suggest William moved with deliberate speed, ensuring that what he declared publicly was already irreversible privately. While public debate raged and speculation spiraled, another process unfolded behind closed doors with clinical precision. Estate structures were not merely adjusted, they were reconstructed. Legal teams reviewed decades-old frameworks, dissecting clauses that once allowed flexibility and redistributing authority with surgical care. This was not a symbolic update designed to complement a headline. It was a structural transformation built to endure scrutiny, challenge, and time itself. Financial advisors operated under extraordinary confidentiality. Non-disclosure agreements tightened, communications narrowed to essential channels. The objective was simple, but monumental. Remove ambiguity. Where previous arrangements permitted interpretation, new provisions established finality. Trust mechanisms were reinforced, beneficiaries clearly defined, contingencies minimized. Every detail signaled intent. Every amendment reduced the possibility of reversal. Central to this restructuring were irrevocable trust clauses, instruments that, once executed, resist alteration. Their inclusion was not accidental. It was strategic permanence. By anchoring inheritance within irrevocable structures, William effectively sealed the direction of generational wealth. This was not about preference, it was about eliminating doubt. The legal architecture now mirrored the public declaration, transforming intention into immovable fact. Symbolism carries power within monarchy, but permanence carries more. To seal legacy early, before ascending the throne, is to declare confidence in the future one is building. William did not wait for coronation authority to consolidate inheritance. He acted while still heir, signaling that his leadership would not be reactive, it would be preemptive. That timing adds gravity. It suggests this was never an impulsive announcement, but a calculated milestone in a longer design. Shielding assets from potential disputes was another critical objective. Royal history is not free from contested expectations. Ambiguity has, in previous eras, created tension that lingered quietly for years. By tightening distribution exclusively to his children, William constructed a financial barrier against internal negotiation. There would be no interpretive gaps to exploit. No future debates about proportional entitlement. The clarity may appear stark, but starkness eliminates contest. Yet permanence carries emotional weight. Legal language may be precise, but it cannot neutralize sentiment. For those who once anticipated shared inclusion, the signing of irrevocable documents felt like a door closing without ceremony. Finality does not shout. It settles. It informs. It reshapes relationships, subtly but decisively. William's resolve may fortify his direct line, but it simultaneously redraws emotional boundaries within the broader family network. This is how generational shifts truly occur, not in speeches, but in signatures, not in applause, but in clauses. The monarchy has evolved before, adapting to political, social, and cultural change. But inheritance reform strikes at something foundational, the distribution of security and influence across time. By consolidating now, William may be accelerating a transition toward a leaner, more centralized royal core. And as the legal dust settles, one realization becomes unavoidable. The architecture of the future has already been built. The debate may continue, reactions may intensify, but the structural reality stands firm. Consolidation is no longer theory, it is law. And with the ink dry, the monarchy found itself standing at the edge of a new era. In protecting his children's inheritance, William may have done something even greater. He crowned the future ahead of time. Not with jewels, but with certainty. Not with ceremony, but with security. The question is no longer whether the monarchy will change, but how deeply this decision has already transformed it. Because what William has constructed is not simply a financial safeguard, it is a new gravitational center. Prince George now stands not only as heir in waiting, but as a future monarch fortified with unprecedented independence. His path to the throne, once defined primarily by title and expectation, is now reinforced by consolidated strength. There will be no diffuse negotiations about legacy when his time comes. No subtle contests over influence. The structure has been shaped to deliver authority cleanly, decisive, without inherited ambiguity. That clarity is both empowering and heavy. It prepares him and it isolates him. Charlotte and Louis, equally secured within this framework, represent another quiet shift. In previous generations, siblings of the heir often navigated uncertain terrain, balancing proximity with limitation. This new model alters that dynamic. Security is no longer distributed through extended hierarchy, but embedded firmly within the immediate family core. It redefines sibling roles, reducing vulnerability and reinforcing unity within a smaller circle. The monarchy's emotional architecture begins to mirror a modern nuclear dynasty rather than a sprawling royal network. Catherine's presence throughout this transformation cannot be overlooked. She has not issued grand declarations or counterbalanced William's stance. Instead, she has reinforced it through composure and consistency. Together they project a singular message. The future will be defined by their children, and the framework supporting that future will not be diluted. In doing so, they present a partnership that prioritizes lineage over legacy politics, stability over shared entitlement. It is a powerful image, disciplined, intentional, forward-looking. The monarchy that emerges from this decision appears streamlined, focused, concentrated around direct succession rather than extended distribution. That concentration may reduce internal friction, But it also marks a departure from older traditions of collective reinforcement. The crown, once symbolically supported by many branches, now rests on a narrower base. That narrowing sharpens identity. It clarifies succession. It simplifies structure. But it also signals that familiarity and long-standing assumptions will no longer guide inheritance. Long-term implications ripple far beyond the present moment. Future generations may inherit not only wealth, but a template consolidation as policy, clarity as defense. The monarchy may evolve into an institution defined less by sprawling lineage and more by fortified continuity. This could strengthen resilience in an era demanding transparency and decisiveness. It could also deepen distance between the royal core and those orbiting its edges. The transformation is both shield and statement. At its heart, this story is about choice. William chose legacy over loyalty to tradition. He chose future certainty over inherited familiarity. He chose to draw a firm boundary where others might have opted for compromise. In doing so, he may have altered more than estate documents. He may have recalibrated the emotional contract between monarchy and family itself. The echoes of that choice will not be immediate thunderclaps. They will unfold gradually, shaping perceptions, alliances, and expectations over years. The crown he will one day wear now carries a different weight defined not only by history, but by deliberate design. And as this chapter closes, the deeper truth lingers beneath every calculation and every consequence. Because when a future king chooses bloodline over tradition, the echoes do not fade, they reshape the crown itself. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.